Hello, everyone. Welcome to Leisrealtalk. How's everyone? I saw someone commented that the crowd size here is someone else's crowd. I was surprised that I don't know how many people are on. I can't tell. But judging by the amount of comments, it looks like it's not one of our uh, most popular topics. No, actually, I normally don't do live streams on Thursdays. I decided I should do one because the subject I feel compelled to talk about the two recent attacks on children in Zurich and Brisbane. So I decided to do this. It's coming straight from my heart. Okay, let's get started. So the question is, by now you've heard about the two attacks by two Chinese men on children, right? So the question is, are they individual acts of terrorism or a sign of collective mental disorder? Um, and in less than 3 months, we've seen three knife attacks in China targeting foreign nationals. So the first one was June 10th. Four American teachers from Iowa who were teaching in Jilin were stabbed in a park by a 55-year-old man, a Chinese man. 2 weeks later, on June 24th, a Chinese man attacked a Japanese mother and her 3-year-old son at a bus stop near a Japanese school in Suzhou. The attacker fatally stabbed a Chinese bus attendant, Hu Youping, who tried to intervene during the attack. And then a couple of weeks ago, on September 18th, which is a sensitive day that marked the start of Sino-Japanese War, another attack targeting foreign nationals happened in Shenzhen, and a 10-year-old Japanese boy was stabbed to death near his school. Just as we haven't fully recovered from the shock, this type of violence has spread to the West. And in the past few weeks, two Chinese men have attacked young children in Australia and Switzerland, causing serious harm to them. And so tonight we'll first talk about the Zurich attack, then we'll talk about the Brisbane attack, and then I'll explain the 5 reasons why the mainland Chinese, or people from mainland China, people having lived under the communist rule, attack the vulnerable. And also, last but not least, I want to talk about how Western governments should address the problem. So first things first, this Tuesday, October 1st, which is China's National Day, a 23-year-old Chinese man using a knife attacked 3 5-year-old boys at a daycare center in a residential area in Zurich. And here I have a picture. This is from the internet. Here we go. Here's the guy. And okay, so his name I could only tell from the pinyin is sorry, what was it? Fan. Yeah, Fan Yuhao or Fan Yuhao. I don't know what the Chinese characters are, but it's Fan Yuhao. And this happened of the 3 boys who were attacked. One boy suffered serious wounds, and the other 2 were moderately hurt. And it happened during midday when the children returned from their probably daily walk. They were returning to the daycare center when this happened, and the attacker was apprehended on the spot. Fan Yuhao, whatever, is his pinyin name. And he is a graduate student studying computational linguistics at the University of Zurich. He started his study last year, so he's only been at the school for a year. Now, he's described by his schoolmates as being quiet and introvert. He's an introvert, and he likes to stay in his room. He lives only a few minutes away from the daycare. Now, a few minutes before the attack, he wrote a Chinese post on Instagram using language of a teenager. And that's his post, part of his post, using the language of a teenager. He expressed. Can you guys hear me? I just want to make sure. Is everything audio sounds okay? Yes? Hello? Loud and clear, St. Peter. Okay, good. Thank you. All right. I just wanna make sure. So he so he wrote a post a few minutes before he, went to the daycare center, and using teenage language, he expressed his sexual fantasies about a woman who was his CCP Youth League leader at the college that he attended, which was Southwest University in China. And in the same post, he also expressed his love and loyalty for the party and his country. And he added 3 Chinese flags at the end of the post and lyrics from a PLA revolutionary song. And in an earlier post, he expressed anger at a seminar hosted by a Swiss think tank and Taiwan's representative office in Switzerland. And he wrote, "Taiwan independence is disgraceful and Taiwan province belongs to China." So from his posts, you can say that he is a typical nationalist little pink, tormented by his sexual fantasy. Now, police has searched his dorm and is trying to find out the motive. Because the attack happened on China's National Day, people want to know if the stabbing coincided with the occasion. Zurich, as well as Europe, is shocked because people are in disbelief that an adult would attack 3 young children. I mean, they're 5-year-old. So police is investigating the motive. Now, at the same time, a similar attack, it's actually a few weeks ago, it was on August the 27th, but it was a similar attack in Australia. It's being reported by Western media. It wasn't picked up by Western media, but because of the attack in Zurich, this Australian attack became worldwide news. So on August 27th, a 33-year-old Chinese man on a student visa poured scalding coffee from a thermos on a 9-month-old baby in a park in Brisbane when the baby and his mom and a friend were enjoying a picnic. The baby's parents don't know the Chinese man. The baby's name is Luca. He's here. Such a cute baby, but terribly burned. The attack caused burns on nearly 60% of his body. And little Luca, I think his name is Luca, underwent at least 5 surgeries, and he may have to live the rest of his life with scars. The man fled to nearby church where he changed his clothes, and from there he caught a share ride to Brisbane's central business district, and surveillance camera caught this is his image. Now, Queensland police shared images from CCTV footage of the suspect. However, the police refused to use the word Asian in the description of the alleged attacker, and instead they called him a person with tan skin. The Queensland police was later criticized for being, politically correct. However, their effort or their being politically correct hindered the identification efforts. The man flew out of Australia from Sydney on August 31st, 12 hours after the police had identified him. According to news report, the 33-year-old Chinese man has no family or criminal record in Australia. He entered Australia on a holiday visa in 2019 and switched to a student visa. And he was reportedly from Hangzhou, China. And he's now on Australia's wanted list. So in the above 2 cases, the men picked young children whom they don't seem to be affiliated with or have known. And also in the 2 cases in China, Japanese children were the target. So the question is, why do they target children? Right? This is the most despicable crime. I mean, that you could think of. In my opinion, there are 5 contributing factors. The first one has to do with CCP's long-standing patriotic education. It has evolved this long, people who are subject to long-term brainwashing or patriotic education. How should I put it? So this intense patriotic education has evolved into an aggressive form of nationalism. And it's actually a dangerous development of what I call a lone wolf terrorism, right? They can erupt anywhere and at any time, targeting anyone. However, being brainwashed by CCP's propaganda, some patriotic Chinese or Chinese nationalists' anger, about the economy, about the poverty, about the lack of freedom, their anger is directed towards foreigners. While these individuals may not be driven by any organization, but they have been long exposed to extremist propaganda and nationalist ideologies. Now, coupled with personal frustrations and anger, this results in random acts of terrorism. Basically, it's just to harm others. And this type of lone wolf terrorism is much more difficult to prevent and to detect. And if you look back, we started 2024 with a mild episode of the Little Pinks acting up. Remember a group of Chinese nationalists got into an argument with Brandon Kavanaugh, aka Dr. K, the musician in London, over a piano at the London's St. Pancras station. That was January. It wasn't that long ago, but that was January, but it was already shocking. And look, 9 months later or 8 months later, it has evolved quickly from a dispute, a verbal dispute, to now more harmful means of attack, as we've seen in the cases in Zurich and Brisbane. And do not think these Little Pinks are just isolated cases. There are a lot of them. For example, a similar incident happened in Taipei on October 1st. Also, October 1st, a group of Hong Kongers living in Taiwan organized a small rally to oppose CCP's rule on China's National Day. And let me come back. I don't want to look at this guy. He's ugly. All right. So a group of Hong Kongers living in Taiwan, they got together. They held a rally because it was October 1st to oppose CCP's tyranny. Now, two tourists from mainland China, a couple, who were just passing by, started to cause trouble for them. And they shouted at the group of Hong Kongers, and they tore down their flags, and they started yelling at them by saying that Hong Kong is part of China, Taiwan is also part of China, things like that. Now, all of that was caught on video, and the Chinese couple was eventually deported because they got into Taiwan on a visitor visa. But the person they claimed to visit no longer lives in Taiwan, so the Taiwanese government deported them. But if you watch the video, you will see these two Chinese absolutely had no idea that their action in Taiwan opposing a group of Hong Kongers was outrageous. They totally assumed what they did was normal, was patriotic, and should be accepted anywhere. It's just they have not believed, they have not doubted themselves for a second. So I'm just telling you, there are just a lot of them out there. Um, Now, so that's the first reason, right? The second reason is, um, uh, I'll start with a quote. American actor and filmmaker John Wayne once said, he said, "I think communism is something so evil, and we're living in a time where people are being so brainwashed that it's like trying to make a case for insanity. It's a mental disorder." And a Chinese wrote today, he said, "The so-called communism is not a political ideology, nor an economic system. It's a crazy mental disorder." I think it's so well said. People who have been subject to CCP's brainwashing suffer various degrees of mental disorder without being aware. And the most common is the Stockholm syndrome, which I have talked about before. I'm not going to elaborate here. It's true that communism is like a mental disease. People who have lived in communist state have more or less mental disorders that they're not aware of. The most common symptom is the lack of trust to people, and also fear. That's the most common ones. Even I have them. Um, and so those are the most common, followed by anxiety and depression. They say that if you think about the past, you have depression, and if you worry about the future, you develop anxiety. And hatred, as we know, is the least healthy feeling one can have because it really hurts your physical body. But it's the most glorified emotion in China under the CCP. So in China, it's so hard to love, but so easy to hate. And even love has become an empty word without much meaning. When the CCP I have this, I have to show you this chart. I can make it bigger because it's something that's very meaningful. Here's the chart. So when the CCP simplified the Chinese characters, the word love, they removed the word heart from the Chinese character. In the center, so the top one is the traditional font, the lower one is the simplified font. And you see the difference is the heart in the middle. And that's removed in the simplified font. So when they remove the word heart, they essentially remove heart from love. Love in China became heartless. Under decades of suppression and censorship, many Chinese are unable to express or verbalize their feelings, such as love, appreciation, frustration, disappointment, or even anger. They cannot verbalize that. They do not know how to express that. Their feelings, in return, can consume them. Many are emotionally disturbed. So in the case of the Zurich attacker, he obviously has some mental issues. He experienced an intense confusion of love, sexual fantasies, mixed with patriotism and celebration of National Day. I think only a person from mainland China can possibly have this kind of confusion, right? So that's the second reason. So the first reason is the intense patriotic education has already evolved into a dangerous form of nationalism that can further develop into individual terrorism. And the second reason is the mainland Chinese have more or less, or to various degree, some sort of mental disorder because of the systemic brainwashing. And number three, even if they don't have a mental health issue, many Chinese have the same problem as the CCP does, which is called bully the weak and fear the strong. In Chinese, we say 欺软怕硬. Basically, it's a symptom that describes someone who avoids confrontation with their superior or those who are more powerful or those who are important to them, but they care less about intimidating those who are inferior or weaker. So geopolitically, that's exactly what we've seen, in the Pacific. The CCP has no problem of intimidating Taiwan, the Philippines, even Japan occasionally. But it's very careful not to rough with the United States. Why? Because, it bullies the weak and the vulnerable and fears the strong. So that's why people say that the CCP is a paper tiger. This is a very common problem in Chinese society. At home, man vents his frustration at work on his wife and children. This is prevalent among well-educated Chinese, especially the high achievers. So in August, I want to show you this. In August, a Chinese professor at Arizona State University, David Zhu, opened fire at his wife, killing her after the two had a heated argument. Zhu allegedly had a long history of domestic violence, which included threats of murder or suicide and an increase in frequency or intensity of incidents. His two teenage children were at home when the shooting happened, and they told police that they were not surprised that their father shot and killed their mother. And they said that right before the shooting, the two were screaming at each other. Now, David Zhu is a Dean's Council distinguished scholar. He's academically very accomplished. And ironically, his expertise is behavioral strategy, leadership, corporate governance, and corporate strategy. His faculty page and LinkedIn profile state that he builds on behavioral theories to examine strategic decision-making of top executives and directors. I found it ironic that this professor teaches others behavioral strategy but fails in his own behavioral strategy at home. I must tell you that growing up, I've witnessed Chinese men being so cruel to the women in their life, mother, daughter, and wife, and especially the high achievers. They're very competent and smart, but cruel to their loved ones at home because those people will put up with them. Whereas people, your colleagues, your boss, or other people outside your household, they won't put up with that. So they vented on their on the wife, on the children, and on their mother. So they appear very sweet and personable in public, in the eyes of their colleagues and friends, but are extremely grumpy and difficult at home. And that's essentially the same problem as the CCP, even though CCP is not sweet and personable at all, on the global stage. At one point they tried to be, but not anymore. So that's reason number 3. This widespread epidemic, which I called intimidate the weak, and then what did I say? Intimidate the weak and tolerate and fear the strong. And the 4th reason is the single child syndrome. So the two attackers in Brisbane and Zurich belong to the single child generation. Even though the professor that you're looking at, David Zhu, and he was 47 years old when this happened. So he was born in 1977. I mean, if he's the first child, his parents didn't. He could be, he could be, the first generation of the single child generation, or the first wave of the single child generation. So they grew up being the center of attention. Let me come back. I don't want to look at these people. They are the center of attention at home. The couple, their parents and two sets of grandparents, give them all the attention that they want. And they're used to that, right? They're used to being the center of attention and getting all the support and all the resources from everyone, from every adult around them. Now, children grew up in that type of atmosphere are used to receiving praises and being taken care of. These people have big egos and cannot tolerate any criticism or even any stress in life. Earlier in the year, a homicide in Silicon Valley shocked the Chinese American community. A 27-year-old Chinese man beat his 26-year-old wife to death. Here's the picture. And they've only been married for a year. He was 27. She was 20. He is 27. She was 26. And they attended one of China's top universities together, Tsinghua University. And after graduation, they came to study at UC San Diego together. And they're both software engineers working for Google with very good income. The couple had just bought a $2 million home, and they lived the life that many Chinese envy. People can't believe that they would ruin everything, so tragically. Now, I think that maybe the young man's entire life has been smooth sailing. He's a single child. From childhood to college, mom and dad have paved the way for him. He was lucky to come to study in the U.S., found a job in Silicon Valley after graduation, but he has never dealt with stressful situation in life where you have to compromise, you have to listen, and you have to come up with a solution, right? He probably has never dealt with that. So some people said that their relation, his relation with his wife wasn't in the best state. But any couple has to deal with that, right? If you cannot deal with that, then you can't really hold on to your marriage. So, but then how could he basically beat her to death? He beat her. So people like that, they don't have the ability, people who grew up as single child in a family, and especially the high achievers who have excelled in academic work, and then they did very well, career-wise. These people are actually the weakest. They're not the strongest. They're the weakest because they have no ability. They have no ability to cope with any stress or stressful situation. They have no ability to survive a conflict, not to even solve it. Now, you should know that many Chinese students who study in the U.S. come from wealthy family, right? If their family, their family has to be wealthy in order to send their kid to study in the U.S. Many are government officials. So these are the privileged. They're more privileged than ordinary Chinese kids. They are really the privileged princes and princesses. So don't be fooled by how polished they look, or how smart they appear, or how well they can talk. Deep down, they have no tolerance for others and no ability to solve a tough situation. I have personally known some of them. You'll be shocked to see. These people they know how to talk to get what they want, and they know how to take care of themselves, but their ability to take on a challenge to solve a difficult situation is very low. It's also said that the father of the 27-year-old man who killed his wife is a government official. I don't know if that's true, but people have been saying that because his family must have connections or has a lot of money because they spent a good amount of money and hired a good defense team for him. And then reason number 5 is unrealistic expectation of life overseas and feeling lonely. Now, this is unique to the Chinese students or young professionals living in the West. Like I said, those students who can afford to come to the US to study usually come from well-to-do families. Many of them are sent by their parents to study and work in the West. They don't necessarily like their life or student life here. They spend their parents' money and indulge in material comfort and don't really take their work and life seriously. I have known some of them, and then they tell me, they get like $5,000 monthly allowance, and then their parents buy them a real estate, so they live in their own home, which usually is an expensive piece of real estate, and then they get $5,000 monthly allowance. Their tuition is all paid. Why do they care about study? Because after graduation, they may not get $5,000 after tax, right, as their first job. So they're not interested in study. And also, when they come, they're not interested in learning, assimilating into the U.S., the American culture, or learn about America. The children that came from poor family have that motivation. They're interested in, surviving, having the ability and the skills to survive in this society, and to learn about America, the American political system and American society, because they have nobody that they can depend on to survive. They have to support themselves through their education and probably through their career. So, but many of these Chinese students, they're loaded with money and they're not even interested in their study. They're just sent here by their parents, and their parents are wealthy. So this summer, I was eating in a local restaurant, a Japanese restaurant. I heard there was a Chinese woman coming in through the door, trying to order food for her and for her son. She accompanied her son to go to college here. And she was talking about how disappointed they were with the dormitories. They were disappointed at the dormitory because they were poorly furnished. And you see, many Chinese have an unrealistic expectation of America, or even Europe or Australia. They expect everyone in US live in houses with marble floors and a chandelier, because that's what the Chinese go after. They don't understand that some very wealthy Americans live in very ordinary looking houses with no marble floors or chandelier. So their first shock was that the hardware they see in the United States, according to their assessment, is very backward. This is a very common notion amongst Chinese. So then once they have that notion, they immediately are not impressed. In some of the American universities, I was told that 70% of the students in their class were Chinese. I don't know if that's still the case now after COVID, but before 2020, especially in business schools, and not the top business schools, like second-tier business schools, or even business class, finance and business class, you will see the majority of the students are Chinese because they love to study finance and business. And so they say that at least half of the students in their class are Chinese. So they borrow each other's notes. They hang out with each other. They speak Chinese. They order Chinese takeout every day from really nice Chinese restaurants. You could say that they didn't even go to the United States to study. Their entire life here is living amongst Chinese. So how do you expect these, Chinese students return to China, or even while they're here, understand Western society, understand American values, understand American democracy, and make a difference in China, right? So, when Xi Jinping visited Mexico in June 2013, shortly after becoming the CCP leader, he made a famous announcement. He declared that China does not export revolution, poverty, or hunger, nor does China cause troubles for other countries. Come think of it, the crazy nationalist little pinks have broke Xi Jinping's promises and are causing troubles. So what do we do now? Well, I have repeatedly said that the U.S. government and governments of other democratic nations should include the Chinese people in the equation when developing strategies and policies concerning China and the CCP. My argument is that the CCP has always resorted to controlling its people and controlling people in other nations as a means to beat its opponents. So from the CCP's perspective, foreign policy and domestic affairs are the same thing, or they're connected. That's why they stir up anti-Japanese and anti-American sentiments domestically. I think the West's best strategy is to include the Chinese people in their foreign relation or in diplomacy. Because if you don't, you're giving these people away to the CCP for them to control. My second argument is that the United States and other democratic nations must have a program to engage the 1 billion brainwashed Chinese who are being controlled by the CCP. I'm not saying that all of them, each one of them, would behave the way like the little pinks do. I'm not saying each one of them is controlled by the CCP, but a significant of them are. Many are leaving China and moving to live in other parts of the world. If you don't engage them, their lack of understanding of democracy, of a normal society, or even of a normal life, or their lack of understanding of normal human relations, their lack of ability to express their emotional feelings, to deal with conflicts, to manage stress, all pose as a threat to our society, right? These problems pose a threat to China. It also poses a threat to the US and other society and to themselves. No one benefit from that kind of behavior or the lack of awareness. I mean, you can't really blame them because they're the victims. They don't know what they don't know, right? I'm not saying that they're the problems, but they are paying the price as a victim. I mean, the problem is the CCP's brainwashing and censorship. So we cannot afford to have more attacks like that in Zurich and Brisbane. So our government must come up with a plan to engage the Chinese. So you may ask, what kind of plan you think the government should do? Well, I think the U.S. government should support any in-language program that broadcast or publish contents that are not controlled by the CCP, that are not subject to censorship. So they should support any content, whether it's generated from Taiwan but Taiwan, a lot of Taiwan media has been bought by the CCP or heavily influenced by the CCP. So there are some, in-language media based maybe in Australia, in Canada, in the US. They should support those in-language media because these are the content creators that provide an alternative source of information to the Chinese-speaking population, right? And also they should support any cultural program, language teaching program that came from Taiwan, any cultural initiative to revive traditional Chinese culture in China, to help Chinese people understand how normal society, what normal human interactions should be. I think a lot of the problems, I'm a Chinese. I I have a lot of Chinese friends. I have Chinese family. I witnessed their problem. I experienced some myself. It's difficult. It's very difficult for them to deal with emotional stress or to communicate with each other. Uh, so you can say that's a mental disorder. You could say that's a lack of ability. You can also say it's a cultural difference because the Chinese are introverted and they don't express themselves. But I don't think so. I don't think it's a cultural difference. Um, I think it's, I mean, in any society, there are the extroverts and there are the introverts. There are people who talk more and there are people who don't. But somehow the mainland Chinese have, they do have issues when it comes to, you know, expressing their feelings and communicating with others and, bridge differences through communication. They do have problem in that area. And then the Taiwanese don't. I think my Taiwanese friends, they're very good at that. Even they speak the same language, they don't have that problem, but the mainland Chinese do. So, yeah, so I just, I've been saying this for a long time that the Western governments need to include the Chinese people in their equation when it comes to addressing relations or strategies with China. And this is the perfect examples to give you to support my argument. So this is a program that I throw in last minute. I hope it's helpful. I think it's very important because we cannot afford to see more attacks like that. I feel really bad for that, for the little baby. I mean, it really just, it broke my heart to see a little baby, 9 month old, who has to subject to that kind of torture, to go through 5 surgeries. It's just, we cannot have this happen again. So that's all the mumbling from Lei. Let's see if people have any comments, questions. Ian Slater, off topic. Is BYD trying to buy Chrysler Motors? I have not heard. I hope not. I hope Chrysler does not sell itself to BYD. It's just going to ruin another American brand. Please, can someone buy Chrysler and not BYD? BYD is having so many problems in China because their cars and their showrooms are combusting. So why would we let BYD to own Chrysler? It defies logic. Oh, Nick Fury. CIA, they are recruiting, they're recruiting agents in Chinese. They're recruiting spies in China, and the Chinese, the Chinese are they're asking, how much money are we paid? Is it safe? It's like the Chinese are actively talking. I think that's a good strategy. I think that's exactly, I think they are using now the Chinese people. So, all right. Okay. All right. That's all. Let me see. Thank you for explaining the culture difference. Lei seems more Canadian to me. What's the difference between a Canadian and American? Somehow I think I'm very predestined with Canadians. When I started my channel, I got a lot of support from my Canadian friends. I actually counted them. I said they're all Canadians. The first few people who encouraged me to do Leisrealtalk were all my Canadian friends. Some of them are still supporting me now. So, yeah, Canada. All right. Maybe I should move to Canada. Also, Ian Slater. Also on topic, will any level of therapy from the West, where when these students get away from CCP, help them heal and see an alternative to their lifestyle? Therapy will only work when they realize they have a problem. So I think it would be hard to convince them that you have a mental disorder. I think it's very difficult for Chinese to accept that they have mental disorder. I think Chinese do not believe mental disorder is a disorder. They think it's a sign of weakness, and they don't want to admit that they're weak. So it will. I don't think it will work. I think the best is having programs organically to have them understand. I mean, as long as they understand that they have been brainwashed by the CCP, some of the things that they believe so strongly was actually false. As soon as they realize that, then they will discover everything else on their own. But before that happens, it's very difficult, to tell them. It will backfire. They will be very defensive. Somebody said, how many therapists does it take to change a light bulb? That's a good question. You need to have a lot of therapists to take on the amount of Chinese here. Someone said they need to go through realization. Exactly. All we need to do is tell them what the truth is. The things that they've learned through the propaganda is not true. That's the most important task we have. As soon as they realize everything they heard in China has been altered or doctored, then they will start thinking. Once they start to look for the truth, then they will discover it on their own. This is the most important thing to do. Because, this is a serious problem. There's so many Chinese coming. Someone actually, this is a good question. I think you guys want to ask me this question. Someone, an American friend asked me today, and she said, why are we concerned with these, wealthy kids living here or studying here when we see so many military, military age, young men, crossing the border as illegal immigrants, crossing the border, and they're secretly lurking in our society. And she said, shouldn't we be more concerned with those Chinese coming into our country illegally? I said, yes, they are. There are a lot of them. But the thing is, I worry less about them to some extent. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that they're not worrisome, but they will not randomly launch attack on children or on innocent people. That's one. Number two, these people are usually came from poor background, right? People from ordinary families or even poor family. So once they come here, I think these people have a more realistic assessment of the U.S. than the wealthy kids. They will understand. They probably long for a normal life where they could actually do well in this society. So I think I don't worry as much about those people now as I do for the wealthy kids. Because those people are stealth. They're not going to cause trouble until the CCP starts a war. And also, these are poor kids, right? Kids from poor families. So we should still have a program for them. See, somebody used to tell me give me this analogy. The difference between Chinese medicine and Western medicine is that the Chinese medicine is truly health care. Because traditional Chinese medicines, the whole concept is how do you coexist with ailments and diseases? You don't try to get rid of your diseases because you can't. Your body has them. So the idea is, how do you create a benign environment where you can coexist with the bad elements in your body? And the idea is to coexist with them peacefully. As long as they don't act up, then you'll be fine. You can coexist peacefully. And they use the concept of a terrorist. Is that they say that we live in a society where there are terrorists and dangerous elements. But the question is, how do we create a benign environment where the terrorists lost interest or lose interest in doing bad things? If they start to worry about how much money they make, how to raise a family, things like that, then as long as they stop, doing things bad, then we can coexist. So the whole idea of traditional Chinese medicine is about coexistence. Have a benign environment that suppresses the bad elements. And I think that's a very, very, that's a very wise way to deal with whether illness or a dangerous elements, right? So I think that's an analogy. So I'm thinking, yes, we do have a lot of undercover PLA soldiers crossing the border, and who are lurking in the U.S. But how do we create a benign environment where these people are encouraged to live normally like the rest of society? They're encouraged to go into business, and then as long as they stop thinking like the CCP, then they can't do anything. I mean, what can the CCP do to them? So that's why in-language program in the United States is so important. It's so important. And I know a lot of you have opinions about the Epoch Times because, they're like the mainstream media attacks Epoch Times, and there are the CCP attack Epoch Times because it's Falun Gong. But the Epoch Times is the first in-language content creator in the U.S. serving the 1 billion Chinese in China. Even the Politburo members read the New York edition of Epoch Times. They're doing something extremely important for this country, for the United States. They're doing exactly that. And yet they're being attacked by the liberal media here. I just don't understand why Americans do that, right? So that's just one example. All right. A lot of the Chinese medicine useless. Isn't a lot of Chinese medicine useless? Well, it depends. You have to see a very good Chinese doctor, because when it comes to Chinese medicine, the quality, the ability in the doctor and varies, and some don't do much. So it depends on. Fortunately, I have a family member. Who's a very good traditional Chinese doctor, and sometimes she and I, we talk about we talk about different concepts in traditional medicine and Western medicine. It's very fascinating. All right. All right. Okay, that's all. All right, that's all. That's all I will say. I'll see you over the week. Oh, here's a question. Wilhelm Sauer. Wilhelm. H and L and E. How do I pronounce that? Okay. The world seems to be worried about China. It's legitimate, or is the world being paranoid? It is legitimate. Our worry is legitimate because China is behind, is the stealth force behind a lot of the regional geopolitical conflicts that we see in the world. So we should be worried. we should be worried. If the party is reading the Epoch Times and they're terrified, well, think about it. The CCP government officials are also the victims of their own censorship. What do you think they read? They don't read the People's Daily. They don't read the they don't watch CCTV, right? So what do they read? Do you think they read the New York Times, the Chinese edition of the New York Times? It's translated. It's translated from English. It's hard to follow. And it's written by, with Western sensibility for Western audience. It's just hard to follow. And also a lot of it is when it comes to China coverage, topics on China, I can't trust mainstream media. Because where do they get their information? They get information from their bureau in China, but their bureau in China are being controlled and influenced by the propaganda department. So any media outlets that have an office in China, I question the accuracy and the objectivity of their China reporting. The only media I would trust, the only media that I would trust on China topics are those media who do not have an operation in China. Because if they do, you can't trust them. The CCP will influence them. So that's why, I can't really, and from time to time, the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times will be fed with tips. You can tell, like right before the 20th Party Congress, the Wall Street Journal predicted the Politburo more accurately than the other media outlets. So we know they have connections with the Xi Jinping's people, but they will use that connection. The Politburo and Xi Jinping's media people will use, Wall Street Journal conveniently for its purpose. So sometimes they will release information that's truthful. Sometimes, it will be manipulated. It's to manipulate our opinion. And it's actually very interesting to watch them do that, because they could be used by the CCP. So, I mean, that's just the sad truth. Anyone who can honestly talk about China and the CCP politics are people who have no affiliation with China. Otherwise, they're not afraid. Otherwise, they're afraid to. Okay, I have no interest of attacking other media outlets, but what I'm saying is really the real situation. Okay. All right, that's all for tonight. Thank you, and I'll see you Saturday. Okay, bye-bye.